I'm going to have to keep to my own words now and do a military campaign here, okay? So I'm going to take a watch here. And so I'm going to really focus this morning very much on the whole world of mental health, emotion, distress and resilience. And mental health is like physical health. It can be seen as a spectrum. And I don't think we think about this enough at all. All of us at any one time can be mentally healthy, mentally or emotionally distressed, or mentally ill. And in real life, these three states kind of intermingle all the time. For example, a good example of physical health analogy, suppose I consider myself physically healthy, but I'm carrying an extra stone of weight. I now have to climb a really steep hill, and I find myself quite physically distressed at the end of the walk, because I'm very short of breath. But I'm not physically ill, but I'm still quite distressed. But if I don't deal with the cause of my distress and take steps to improve my lifestyle, for example, there's a greater chance that over time I will become physically ill. Does that make sense? And we have to start seeing mental health in a very similar kind of way. So this is technically what the WHO call mental health, a state of well-being, where every individual realises his or her potential. I feel very strongly about that one. And that they can cope with the normal stresses of life, which is resilience, and can work productively and fruitfully and able to make a contribution to his or her community. Nice definition. But the vast majority of mental health difficulties in everyday life are not due to severe mental illness. They're due to a mixture of life crisis situations intermingled with common mental health conditions. And these are toxic stress or burnout, which I'm seeing a lot of, anxiety, which is rampant at nearly epidemic proportions, mild to moderate depression, addiction, i.e. gambling, alcohol, drugs, etc. Does that make sense? So many present here, I'm just going to quickly flick through these. We don't see toxic stress, but I see it all over the place. It comes when our stress system becomes overwhelmed from a mixture of work and non-work-based stressors. We start pumping out those cortisol. We get all kinds of physical consequences, which we'll discuss. These are typical non-work stressors: family and relationship problems, bereavement, financial or housing problems, commuting, coping with personal or physical illness or disability. I actually call it life. Work-based ones are very important: interpersonal conflicts, work overload, too much information, emails, inability to switch off, etc. That makes sense? So anyone here who's never had this? Where we're constantly tired, lots of interest, apathy, sleep problems, nightmares, teeth grinding, feeling down or flat, easily angered, fighting more partners and more colleagues. Can you all relate to that? We're burning out. Or we're getting headaches, tummy pains, increased cold sores, mouth ulcers, etc. Poor concentration, decision making, negative behaviours, stop exercising, poor diet, excessive use of alcohol, or late night surfing the web. I think we can all relate to that as well, can't we? Yeah. So why is that relevant? Because stress kills. We've had 3 suicides amongst our medical population over the last couple of years in our area alone. To give you an idea of the physical consequences of stress, I know of a young manager who didn't listen to his body and his mind, and now has had a massive stroke and will never speak to his family again. So there are 3 main kinds of anxiety which can cause emotion distress: acute anxiety, general anxiety, social anxiety. These are rampant. Panic attacks, do you know what they are? Sudden bursts of intense physical symptoms, heart pounding, shallow breathing, etc. Usually lasts 5 to 8 minutes, can last up to an hour. Phobias, where I develop all of the above when I'm exposed to certain situations: workplaces, crowds, buses, trains, planes. Do you consider these to be a problem? Believe it or not, they're a major source of emotion distress. The number of young people, I had one young girl cutting herself for 4 years. And when I got her parents out of the room and chatted to her, the reason she was cutting herself was because of panic attacks. And nobody was explaining her what to do. So in one session I was able to tell her how to clear them, and that was the end of her cutting. See what I mean? So what looks like something very simple is not. If you have a person who, for example, won't go to school because of a phobia, for similar kind of reasons, then that causes great emotion distress. General anxiety, a lot of our young kids are suffering from this, catastrophizing, worrying, procrastinating, indecisive, constant sense of foreboding, trying to be perfectionist, constantly self-rating, and physical bouts of fatigue, poor cognition, sleep problems, nightmares. Can anyone relate to these? Yeah. Social anxiety, a really common disabling disorder amongst our young people in particular. I was at a meeting in Cork, and this lady came up to me to tell me she was really sad about it. Her 17-year-old was just after dying by suicide, and it was completely social anxiety. He just couldn't handle the social anxiety. And I really just threw my hands in the air, because you can clear social anxiety with a couple of visits to somebody who knows what they're doing. It's a very easy thing to clear, actually. But this is where a young person, or any person, suffers from intense anxiety in social situations for a period of greater than 6 months. And the real secret of social anxiety is this constant fear of being judged harshly by others in social situations. This is going to become a massive problem in our adolescent population as time goes on. Because the more we use our smartphones, the more we break down what I would call the face-to-face communications, the more social anxiety is going to increase. 2 types: performance anxiety, where you have to perform in front of people, or social interactions, which is the important one, where you have to engage with other people. I'm just giving you a quick flick through what I call common causes of emotion distress. Depression is a clinical condition which occurs in bouts. Each bout will last 6 to 12 months. Really important, depression is not a lifelong illness. It comes in bouts. And 80% will have only between 1 and 4 bouts in their whole life. And yet we label people as depressives, which is a terrible thing to do. The other 20% may have more persistent, regular relapse. But in between these bouts, people are really well. Now, I really want to if I came here and did nothing else this morning, only this next point, it would have been worthwhile. 50% of all cases of depression present for the first time between the ages of 13, 14, 15 and 25. 25% between around 13, 14 and 18, and 25% between 18 and 25. And we missed the first group completely. And a lot of self-harm comes from that group. When they get to college, they crash. But when you ask them, when was their first bout, they'll tell you, I had one when I was 15 or 16. 50%, as I said, are twice as common in women. Common postnatal period, late onset of periods in 60 over for the first time. Again, all the age groups are represented with depression throughout life. These are just typical symptoms. Persistent low mood for over 2 weeks, usually present for lifelong after. I just want to talk. It's like living in a dark well, and you're looking up at the light, and you wonder, are you ever going to be able to see that light again? Are you ever going to be able to climb out of that well? It goes on for up to 6-9 months. Women describe it as much, much worse than childbirth. It's a deep-seated emotional pain. It's not just having a bad day. The person is absolutely exhausted. They wonder how they're going to make it to lunchtime, never mind make it to the end of the evening. Sleep problems, particularly early waking in the morning and ruminating. Anhedonia means you lose all enjoyment of life, loss of drive, loss of appetite. Watch that in young men. The only sign you may have a young person is depressed, maybe weight loss. And there's only 2 reasons for weight loss in young men in general, apart from drugs or something like that. And those 2 are eating disorders and depression. And one woman said to me, if only I had known that, I could have intervened before something happened. Loss of interest in life, negative thinking about themselves and the world. And this is massive. This internal conversation with yourself that you're worthless, that you're useless, that you have no value. The one that I really want to pick out is cognitive difficulties, because when young people particularly are depressed, they suffer significant cognitive problems. They can't remember, they can't concentrate, they can't focus, they can't make decisions. And then everybody calls them lazy. And that's what happens when they go to college and they crash. They simply can't absorb the information coming in. I would say that in general, you will almost never see a person with genuine depression who doesn't have some cognitive problems. And it's also part of the reason why, if we chase in to try to counsel a person with significant depression, they won't remember what you said 5 minutes later. So that's genuine depression. Suicide thoughts, there's only one mistake you can ever make at any age, by the way, if you think a person is not in a good place, and that is not to ask him about depression, or not to ask him about suicide. It's a great relief for most people because suicide thoughts to depression particularly are like temperature or to infection. They're really common. But there's the second one. Ask them, what would you do if have you plans or ideas as to what you might do? And the person who tells you, I'm looking at rope in the garage, I'm walking down by the river, I'm building up tablets, men will tell you I want to turn the wheel. That becomes an emergency. That's when you have to move in, okay? Okay, mental illness. Most mental illness comes in bouts. Usually there's frequently underlying neurobiological illnesses, strong genetic and family backgrounds. I'm not going to go through these. Severe treatment-resistant depression, bipolar disorder, psychosis, OCD, anorexia. They're the really serious ones. This is the mental health teams. This is psychiatric care a lot of the time. Suicide, we know there's a strong link with mental health difficulties, particularly depression, addiction, bipolar, schizophrenia, and personality disorders. But there's also a really strong link with social and personal issues such as relationship problems, debt, financial and housing problems, bullying, sexual identity issues, alcohol and substance abuse. So therapy emotion traits include depression, shame, rage, guilt and morbid jealousy. Remember, people die because of their emotions. We never think of that. In all cases there's some emotion distress. The key common factors: depression in some form, either low grade or significant depression, a great sense of worthlessness, extreme emotion distress, and inability to cope with it. In other words, I can't problem solve my distress. Distorted thinking and alcohol. They're the common threads to nearly all suicides. So how can we reduce mental distress and the impact of it? It's best done by lifestyle changes and resilience. So lifestyle, I said this down in Cork here, this is the boring bit. 30 minutes of exercise a day. We all know what to do nutrition-wise. Alcohol is the elephant in the room because we're all drinking far too much. Sleep is the most important single thing of all, believe it or not, but we never discuss it. Technology detox on a regular basis, addictive, destroys cognition and intimately connected with sleep. This is just some quick technology protocols. I'm sure this will be covered over the day. No devices in bedrooms. No phone-free intervals, particularly meal times for families. All technology in every house switched off by 10:30 at night, and that includes us. We don't tell our children to do things we don't do ourselves. And if exercise or reading, switch off your phone. Only check emails at certain times of the day. Try and have phone-free days. Stop aimless browsing at night, which causes huge problems. And decide, is your phone in charge of you, you're in charge of your phone. Okay? By the way, if we did that, our anxiety levels would probably reduce by 50%. Sleep. If we don't get enough sleep, half the reason for our difficulties in young people is they're not getting their 9.5 hours sleep. We all need 8.5 hours sleep. Young people need 9.5 hours sleep. Most young people are about 10 to 15 hours sleep deprived every week, which doubles or trebles or quadruples their chances of getting anxiety, depression, suicide thoughts, etc. So tips: bed by 11, this is for the adults, 11:30 if possible. Rise the same every day. 8 hours is the great healer. No phones or devices. Blackout blinds. Avoid coffee after midday. Okay, I'm not going to go into everything else. So later we can. I want to move on to resilience. I'm trying to keep track now where I am here. Good. Okay. Emotional resilience is what I'm really interested in. It's how we adopt emotionally. Hello? Yes, yeah. See how resilient I had to become there? Emotional resilience, how we adapt and cope emotionally with the slings and arrows about life. This is something I feel very strongly about. There has been an assumption that this is something you either have or you don't. I absolutely disagree with that. I think emotional resilience is a skill that we can learn. So I put together 20 key skills that I believe would transform the lives of all of us, and especially our young people. So let's have a look. Social skills, these are typical ones. Empathy, how to read non-verbal cues. The art of conversation, my God, is that dying quickly. How to banish social anxiety and to deal with performance anxiety. Personal skills, how to challenge perfectionism, catastrophizing, how to cope with failure. Our young people cannot handle failure. How to problem solve. We're losing our ability to solve problems. How to stop procrastination, mindfulness, how to deal with low frustration tolerance, how to deal with the physical symptoms, anxiety, etc. And then life skills, how to deal with conflict, how to deal with the unfairness of life. When I talk to young people, I only give them two final messages. Anybody leaving this place who believes that life is fair or life is going to be full of comfort, better wake up. Because life is unfair and is full of hassle. And our young people just don't get that. We have fed them a message that life should be fair and that life should be full of, they shouldn't have to experience discomfort. And of course, the more we feed them that message, the less resilient they become. Okay? So, most of these skills can be learned within 3 months. 3 months, I would teach anybody any of these skills within a 3-month period. And sometimes you may need assistance, though, to develop these. And I think there are wonderful organisations all around this room, some of whom you're going to be able to talk to later, who are happy to assist you in dealing with all of these issues. Because sometimes we just need help to deal with our emotional stress, and sometimes we need to develop more emotional resilience skills. And they're going to decide, by the way, everybody's talking about suicide prevention, but it's this world that's going to actually decide it. It's a bit like people dying, you're sitting by the side of a river and people are floating by all the time, and you're pulling the bodies out all the time, and some of them are dead and some of them are not dead. But if you want to actually stop the bodies floating down the river, you have to go upstream and find out where they're going in. But then you have to go a step further and say, Jesus, they're all falling in here. I'll have to try and stop that. But maybe if I brought it a step further back, and I taught everybody how to swim, if I fell into the river, would I survive? And that's what resilience is really about. It's actually about teaching you how to swim long before you get to the river. And that's the problem at the moment. We're at the river pulling out the bodies. And our job is to try to teach people to swim before they ever get near the river. Okay, it's a nice thought to go away with, okay? So, I'm going to start off, you're going to do a bit of work now, alright? Okay, I'm going to list off the following 6 things. Okay, social media, hobbies, work, children, wider family relationships, and you have 1 minute to put them in order of priority in your life. What are you actually doing in your life at this moment in time? Okay. I've done this with really large groups. I've done it with my own colleagues. To give you an idea, one girl came up to me, a female colleague, and she gave me a hug. At a subsequent meeting, and I said, why are you giving me a hug? And she said, because this changed my life. Out of all the docs that I talked to that day, one got it right. 200 physiotherapists, I don't know if anyone got it right, maybe 1 or 2. Okay, your job is to put them in order, honestly, no bullshit, no kind of, this is what everybody thinks I should put down. This is what I'm actually doing in my life at this moment in time. Have you all done it? Okay. Would people like to give me I'm going to ask a couple of people. Good. Good. Okay. Anybody else?
Children, relationship, work, self, social media, wider family.
Good.
Self, children, relationship, work, wider family, social media.
Okay. Maybe 1 or 2 more?
I have work.
Yeah.
Work.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, isn't it interesting to get the variety? Believe it or not, you're actually really, really good. Because I've heard much worse breakups than that. This is a typical unhealthy list. Work, children, extended family, relationships, the rest, and self. And believe it or not, I would regularly see that. Is that okay? And I would say it's women, it's children first, and men, it's work first. Okay, that's a recipe for emotion distress. That's a recipe for years of difficulty, relationship problems, fighting, tiredness, stress, fatigue, problems with children. That's what a healthy list should do. Self, relationship, children, wider family, work, and the rest. Okay? Challenging, isn't it? So why do we say self?
Because if you can't look after yourself, you can't look after others.
Exactly. You know the way on the air, and when you're on the airline, they say if the oxygen mask comes down, put your own mask on first. Otherwise, you can't, because if you're unconscious, you can't help your child. But the difficulty for most of us is we don't put self first. We think it's selfish, but it's not. It's good mental health, because we don't look after our physical health and our mental health. So after that, if you're fortunate to have a good relationship, please, please, please guard it with your life. It's the most important thing that you'll ever have in your life. Nothing else will really matter. You know, your work colleagues won't be there when you're dead or when you're dying. Your children will be scattered. It'll be himself or herself at the bedside. Do you know what I mean? So remember that. Keep those as priority. So I think after that then, I think children should come third, not first. Wider family, if they're relevant, if particularly parents, if there's an issue, only then work, and then the rest. Some people put hobbies first. Some people would be out doing their 5 miles of running every day, and unless I kept my 5, or unless I spent three hours gaming or something like that, then that's not healthy. Okay, here's a simple exercise. For a week, for 3 months, you and your partner sit down and review your priority list. Okay? And if you feel that you're not living up to that list, try and see what changes you're going to make that week. And people have come back to me and said, this transformed their lives. Because it's very difficult to do, but very challenging, but very, very good. Empathy, right. Empathy is learning how to sense where people are from an emotional point of view. So we're going to quickly do a little exercise, all right? I'm going to give you 1 minute rather than 2 minutes. You have to turn around to the person beside you. You have to tell them you're really struggling with the increasing demands of work or whatever, or maybe at home. And the person beside you sharing the story has the job of being completely disinterested, totally dismissive, and cold during the conversation. Off you go. Okay. Now you're going to experience the other side. For the next minute, you have to switch around. Now the person listening has to play the role of being completely absorbed in the other person's story, seeing themselves in the distressing situation that's been shared. And they should, through their non-verbal cues and tone of voice, make the person sharing the story feel as if the most important person in their life. Off you go. Not as interesting at all, I feel like doing a John Burke say, order! Okay. What you've experienced there is a lovely, simple example of positive empathy or negative empathy. Isn't that interesting? First one was negative empathy and second one was positive empathy. Now remember that when you're dealing with somebody who's emotionally distressed, how you come across to them will mean they'll either open up or shut down. So empathy is the door to the soul of another person. Many assume we either have it or don't, but I believe it's a skill. And I've taught the skill to so many people. If you can learn empathy in your lives, you'll be more peaceful, you'll be more effective, and you'll cope better with life's challenges. And you'll also find your social and personal relationships blossoming. So, there are two kinds of empathy. I was talking to 450 people at a conference over the weekend in Cork, and one person asked, well, can we get compassion fatigue? And the answer is yes. Can we get too much emotional empathy? Yes, we can. So it's very important we understand the difference between emotional empathy and cognitive empathy. Emotional empathy is where that's what you were experiencing there. Do you know that sense of, feeling where the other person was at? Or either closing them down or opening them up. But cognitive empathy is where we consciously try to identify and understand another person's feelings. It's more like it's more of a rational interaction. Does that make sense? It's what great therapists do, great doctors, great priests, great people who can relate to people. It's often called perspective taking, where I'm trying to kind of see the other person's perspective. This is a wonderful skill to be able to develop. So 2 exercises that I would give people, I would make them for a 4 to 6 week period, become aware of positive and negative. So their job would be to, as they're going around their daily life, experiencing and being very observant of positive and empathy experiences all over the place, till they begin to see the effects of what it's like when somebody's being positively empathetic or negatively empathetic. And then to do that for a further 4 to 6 weeks, where you put it into practice in your own interactions. And that means you get yourself out of the picture and you put yourself in the other person's place. And if we all did that a lot more, we'd have a lot less conflict. Okay? That's what's going on at the moment in Brexit. People they're not doing this. They're staying in their own worlds. Okay, the third common one that causes problems is uncertainty. Do we all struggle with uncertainty? It's one of the commonest causes of anxiety. It leads to huge amount of difficulties because we're trying to control our lives. And mental health is actually about learning that you cannot control life. So one of the ways we teach people to do this is to teach them how to get rid of uncertainty. So what we're going to do, if we cannot achieve this demand when we're anxious, we think we're failures. And that's what our young people do. I must be absolutely certain to get 600 points in Deep and Cert, or I'm a total failure, etc. So, to teach you how to do this, are you prepared to do this exercise? Do you all want to become mentally healthier? Yeah. Right, okay, you agreed to the exercise, okay? So I want you to list off, very quickly now, about 5 or 6 activities that you really love doing. It could be TV, Netflix, yoga, exercise, walking, shopping, cooking, listening to music, etc. Would you list off about 6 or 7 items there on a piece of paper? By the way, if a person can't write down this list for me, I immediately know their lifestyle has become completely restricted. So, very interesting thing to do. Oh, you can add your own. Anything you like doing. Just give me 6 or 7 things that you really enjoy doing. It could be using social media. It could be walking or running. It could be shopping. It could be listening to music, reading, whatever. But they have to be things you really like. Is that important? They can't be things that you're wishy-washy about. No, I really love getting up every day. Many women say, I really love cooking, or I like my glass of wine. Do you know, it would be a great one. I like going out with my husband or my partner for a meal. I like going to the movies. You know, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Okay, got your list ready? Now for the wicked bit. For the next 4 weeks, every time, suppose you've decided you're putting down TV and Netflix, every time you want to watch any episode of any series or any sport event or anything that you really want to watch on TV or Netflix, you have to toss the coin. Heads you can watch it, tails you miss it, and you can't watch it and repeat. Every time you want to go for a walk, heads I can walk as fast as I want, tails I have to walk like a snail. Every time you want to go out with your partner for a meal, this is a great one. You both have to get ready. And as you're walking out the front door, you have to toss the coin. Heads you can go, tails you miss it. The question is, how did you adapt? Isn't that what this is all about? How do I adjust when my organised world is suddenly blown to bits? Because what I'm doing is I'm taking your everyday life and destroying it. Every time you want to go out and have a glass of wine, heads I can have wine, tails is water. Every time I go shopping, the girls will love this, and I find something I really like, it's good value, looks great to me. Heads I can take it, tails I have to leave it behind. And so on. And you have to do, I would get people list off maybe 10, 15, 20 items until their lives are in chaos. But after the month they come back and they say, you know, I began to learn eventually to accept that life is like a coin. Sometimes it goes my way, and sometimes it doesn't go my way. And it's what do I do when it doesn't go my way? Because that's what we're lacking at the moment, adaptability. So resilience is about adaptability, and adaptability is about accepting uncertainty. Does that make sense? Great exercise. So life is like the toss of a coin. There's always a percentage chance it'll go your way, or equally it won't go your way. And the secret is learning how to adapt. If you don't get it after 4 weeks, you do it for another 4 weeks. Finally, the last and most important emotive skills of all, in the workplace and everywhere else, is unconditional self-acceptance. So I want you to do the following exercise, all right? Here we go again. So I want you to draw a line between 1 and 100. 1 being that you're crap, and 100 means that you're brilliant. All right? And what I want you to do, I want you to mark down where do you rate yourself as a person between 1 and 100. Is that okay? This is your chance. Of course I'm up high. By the way, just to let you know, the only problem I ever have trouble with are the people up at 95 to 100. They're my bugbear. Okay? Now I want you to write down or tick off on your scale, where do you think other people rate you? Of course they rate me high. Okay? Now let's go ask you a few questions. I want to visualize that you made a major mistake at work. Where would you rate yourself then? And where would other people rate you? Or you're told that you're a poor parent. Where would you rate yourself then? And where would other people rate you? Or you're diagnosed with depression and put on antidepressants, and word goes out to your family and friends and work colleagues, etc., that you have depression or about a depression or on treatment. Where would you rate yourself then? And where would others rate you? Or if you come from maybe a socially deprived area, that one of your family has gone to prison, where would you rate yourself then? And where do you think other people would rate you? Interesting questions, aren't they? So, how many people changed their rating? A whole lot of us, didn't we? Why? Because we play this rating game all day long, don't we? So depending on whether things are going well or not, we rate ourselves up or down. But can you rate a human being at all? It's actually a trick. It's a trap. But everybody falls into it. Because that's what we all do, don't we? Can you measure a human being? Can I take 3 or 4 people here and measure them, measure their worth, for example, one person versus another? Can you take your children at home and say one is greater than the other? Of course you can. Human beings are not like that. They're not commodities. So, the most effective way to become comfortable in your own skin and develop unconditional self-acceptance is to follow the advice of the father of CBT, Albert Ellis, who said we have to stop rating ourselves as human beings as we're special and unique. That means we also don't accept other people's rating. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I can't rate myself, I can't allow other people to rate me because there's no scale. But I have to take responsibility for my behaviour. I can rate my behaviour, which includes my skills and talents. So what we have to do, the shortcut to mental health, is separating who we are as people, as human beings, from what we do, our skills and our talents. And this is the battle that I fight with young people all the time. Why? Because they're merging who they are with their success or failure in every area of their lives. Does that make sense? From their appearance, from their success in exams, from their what others think of them in their peer group, etc. So, if we are true self-acceptance, it means you're not allowed to rate or measure yourself as a person. You won't accept other people's rating or measurement of you as a person, but you will accept or measure or judge your behaviour and skills. The enemy, the guy that kills people, the guy that causes suicide, is this guy. Is your internal pathological critic. This is the enemy. This is this voice in our head that we all have, this really negative internal ruminatory voice. And when we're very either anxious or down, the PC, who's vague about he talks rubbish, tries to convince us that what it says is true. And it suggests that we're useless, weak, failures, worthless, boring, or abnormal. They would be typical words that go on in the head of the person who's in trouble. And these are all forms of rating, aren't they? So, when I actually get to the point, for example, that I believe that I'm absolutely worthless, then I become more at risk of going down dark roads. So over a 3-month period, if you want to develop unconditional self-acceptance, you have to carry a notebook, challenge, write down when you find yourself rating, the trigger in the rating, and then challenge it as follows. Am I a weak person, or am I weak at a skill? Can you see the difference? If I say I am weak, it means I'm suggesting I'm a weak person. If, on the other hand, if I say, hold on a minute, I'm not a weak person, but what am I weak at? And the reason that's so important is because I can do something about it. Similarly, am I a useless person or just useless at a skill? Exactly the same. What am I going to do about it? Am I a failure? This is the one I really love. Am I a failure at success as a person? My God, do we live in a world where success is seen as everything? Or am I simply failing at a task at a particular moment in time? Very different, isn't it? So I'm not a failure, I'm just failing at a task. Because if I fail at a task, then I can focus on how I might improve and my chances of being more effective the next time. So remember, the only failure in life is not getting back up again. The secret of resilience. Okay, that's emotional resilience, that's self-acceptance. The last 2 books are really probably well worth getting. Emotional resilience is a lovely book full of all these skills. And I'm not going to answer any questions now, is that okay? But if you have any questions, will you write them down and give them to Sylvia, etc., and we'll answer them later. Is that okay? And it's a pleasure being here this morning.